Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Jeff Heilman Project. As you can see, if you're watching online today, if you're not and you're an audio listener, welcome. And have you tried watching on YouTube yet at the Jeff Heilman Project? If not, head on over there and you can see I have been spring cleaning, so forgive the harried appearance or harried appearance, I think is how they say it. I am wearing clothes with paint on them, tatty old shoes, and I just came from cleaning not but 5 minutes ago. So the reason why I bring this up is because I thought it would be fun for the next 30 minutes or so if Jeff could take us down memory lane to some of his most classic, most funny, most memorable moments that he spent. If you did not know, not only is Jeff an accomplished businessman, a expert golfer. Well, I would say he's a pro golfer. Would you call yourself an amateur back again, or?
No.
I mean, he's an excellent
I'm
golfer
I, I'm
and
still
instructor.
technically a professional because
Okay.
an amateur status in the old school days, if you were an amateur, it meant you were wealthy and you didn't have to play golf for money.
Okay.
And if you're a professional, you were working class and you basically belonged in a barn.
So Jeff's not only a professional golfer,
So I am a sludge player, scrappy.
Sigma cum laude of School of Hard Knocks. He also, at one point, was a professional
Not a gentleman.
cleaner and owned a janitorial business. I highly recommend anyone who's getting started out in life and starting a family, going into business for yourself. This is one of the really good businesses while you're young that you can do to make money, because it's a job nobody wants to do. It's a dirty job. And so as our resident Mike Rowe,
I have done some dirty jobs.
Jeff has done some dirty jobs, and I thought it would be really fun, honey, if you would take us down memory lane in some of your most memorable dirty jobs on the janitorial cleaning business that you used to own. One of the ones I think that stands out the
worst
most.
was our next
go
door
ahead. Tell us the story.
Well, let's.
I was thinking of the potatoes, but
the potato one was actually relatively clean. They were just so.
Tell us paint the portrait of a dirty job
in
of
the
Jeff
world.
Heilman.
In the world of apartments, you have apartment maintenance. Maintenance can be anything from repairs to painting to carpets to windows to electrical to
Garbage
turnover
disposals,
cleaning, garbage disposals, plumbing at a system level, plumbing at a unit level, exterior lights, painting of the exterior, chimney cleaning. There's so many things that can go wrong with an apartment. And so when I I was working at an auto parts store for $8 an hour, and I had a friend who had an apartment cleaning business, Mitch Arjvac. He had an apartment cleaning business, and he had, he and his wife were both beautiful. They were a couple years older than us. He had a super ambitious. Like, he was working a job. When we were together, he got a job working at UPS in the morning. So he'd be at UPS from 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning until 7 in the morning. And then we'd go clean apartments for 8 hours.
And when he says clean apartments, let's be specific.
This is not household dusting.
Right.
We're not lifting pieces of art. This is, we just got evicted. We were drug addicts, and now we're going to bail on this apartment and leave hundreds of unopened pieces of mail and trash and animal excrement.
You were lucky and you just got a typical move out. But
yeah, sometimes it was easy. But they always tried to reduce our fees on those. I'm like, look, it's typically ladies that were doing the apartment leasing. I'm like, ladies, this is how we make our money. Yeah. Remember the crap job you gave me last week that we didn't get a chance to get any extra for? And sometimes you could get extra if they're really, really bad. You could get it justified, but they had to normalize their costs. Well, we had to normalize our income.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were times where we'd be in and out in an hour, and we'd make. I think we charged. I think for a 1-bedroom it was like $150, and for a 2-bedroom it was like $225.
But this was 20
25. This 30 years ago.
This
Yes,
was
30 years ago.
So I guess
So you figure, if gas, let's just use a multiple. If gas was $1.50 and now it's $6, just multiply it by 4. So I don't know if that's actually kept up with inflation, but relative, like a 1-bedroom apartment, which we could do in a couple of hours, what's 4 times what would be $600?
Yeah.
So 2 guys.
Because they'd have you come in after. Would they have you come in after the carpet had been replaced and the paint had been done?
We had to come in after, because if the paint is done, they're going to make a mess. If the carpet is done, they're going to make a mess. So we were always the last ones to go before final walkthrough, before somebody would move in.
Unless it was an eviction.
Oh. And then they would have us come back multiple times. Yeah, so I'm trying to think back. And then there was also a time when we started painting apartments, because you'd make more money painting and it was less work. And they would apartment communities usually would supply the paint because they wanted it to be a certain uniform sheen and color. Oh my God. Our next door neighbor, we'll start with that one, the very worst. The apartment community we're living in, they were as close to slums. I think we had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath townhouse with a small kitchenette, and I think we were paying $600 a month for rent when we found out we were going to have Jeffrey. And
it was the middle row. There was windows on the front and windows on the back, but there was nothing.
And we had neighbors on both sides.
Neighbors on both sides.
I think the square footage on that place was maybe 800 square feet.
Maybe.
And that included a staircase, like the staircase counted as, which we basically hang laundry on the staircase. And the guys next door to us were heroin addicts. And we didn't know that at the time. People that do heroin are fairly good at keeping that information to themselves. They had lived in the townhome next to us, which originally had light blue shag carpeting. Berber would be.
Describe walking in. Like,
there was the electricity had been turned off. So that's always fun with the fridge.
Oh, so there must be a smell.
So they had a full fridge of food that had not been refrigerated in 3 weeks. That stunk so bad, Mitch and I had to take turns with gloves going and doing, all right, I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to go grab one thing I can find out of the fridge and bring it. We had to get a dumpster for their place for an 800 square foot. We had a 40-foot or like a 25-foot by 10-foot by 8-foot cubic dumpster for beds, furniture, stereo equipment, clothing, beanbag chairs, garbage, rotting food, mail. It was horrific. And I'm sitting there going, how great could our life be as apartment cleaning people? That's when I knew it was time to get out of the apartment cleaning business, because the only place I could afford to live in was the single worst apartment. And Mitch and I did the math on it one time. I think we did 1,100 apartments in like 2 years.
Wow.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was. I remember, it speaks to mental, acumen. It speaks to the devastation that drugs does, because how anybody could live like that is just horrific. But yet it also speaks of it speaks of the reality that I've always lived by, which is there's no mess that can't be cleaned up.
Eventually.
You're not ever going to be too far gone that you can't recover. The Exxon Valdez taught us that even ducks can be bathed in
20
dish
years.
soap,
You can wash them in dish soap, and eventually the birds don't die.
Eventually things will come around. What about, I remember when you guys were in the painting business, and how was it that you left a 5-gallon paint?
Oh, we'll get to that. Let's get back to my next door neighbor.
Go to the next door neighbor.
So we walk in and we're like, I don't know if our shoes will protect us from the hypodermic needles that were on the ground.
On the floor, laying around.
Like hundreds of them. It was like landmines. Thousands of unopened pieces of mail, all of which were bills due. And then the carpeting. Imagine living in an apartment with tan bark right outside the front door, which it's going to find its way into your carpet.
Right.
These guys had not like, it's not even replaced the carpet. It's like they couldn't even identify it as carpet. There was a black habit trail of tan bark that had been tracked for 8.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Up to where the outsides were dark brown, okay, originally light blue, and the middle was jet black.
Oh my gosh.
The filthiest, most disgusting. We tried using trisodium phosphate and mops to scrub the nicotine out of the semi-gloss paint sheen, and we would mop the floors with trisodium phosphate to try to cut the tar, and the tar would seep out in like pores of Jesus's blood. Jesus bled through his pores in the Garden of Gethsemane, and
tobacco,
the walls,
nicotine bled through the walls.
Bled nicotine out of, and they were like bright yellow.
Is there ever any way to get through that other than just replacing the drywall?
Just replace the drywall.
Yeah, because now on HGTV, they just pull the walls down.
We had to tear all for an apartment turn. Just for an apartment turn, we had to. There's no flooding involved. It's just smoke. It's just constant chain smoking and habit trails walking that never vacuumed. So they had to tear out all the drywall and retexture and repaint it, which that we didn't do.
Yeah.
They had to fix the electrical. The air conditioning and HVAC system had to be completely replaced because the filters were just covered with like bus terminal tar from the 1960s. The habit trail carpets had to be replaced. All the appliances had to be replaced because we couldn't find the bottom of the scum of moldy, rotting food from the fridge, which was 10 years old anyway. There was food in the oven that was left rotting at room temperature, and the countertops were destroyed because of their drunken, heroin binges. They take knives and stick them and carve up all the Formica countertops. The windows were okay. We had to scrub those. We could barely get the tar off of those.
So you have to do junk removal.
And they had to do a complete dumpster size junk removal to get all the furniture and stuff out. It took us 2 weeks.
Is that the one was that the unit that later Patrick and Sarah moved in?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were cool. They were like super cool.
Patrick
so we did get some really good neighbors
Patrick
that
and Sarah moved
next
in
door.
Immediately
but
following.
The fact that like what a contrast though to consider like all of that and then like you get it cleaned, you get it remodeled, and somebody perfectly normal with a little kid moves in next door.
Yeah,
like,
with a 1-year-old.
Nothing.
Yep, just like they're jumping off a curb. Nothing.
So you could say you've been in the rehabilitation business.
Yes,
since you first
I was rehabbing my next door neighbor's crack house. It was brutal. I just remember I'm like, who signed us up for this deal? This is awful. We basically worked on that thing for, I think Mitch and I made like $500 a piece. But I mean that would be like 2 apartments.
Yeah.
And we cleaned 15 apartments worth. So Mike and Cammie made out like bandits on that one. That was the apartment manager that they lived. He was in the Navy.
They were close.
He was going to dental school, I think.
A dentist, and I think she was a hygienist.
Yeah.
So what about
that was the worst though. It never got worse than my next door neighbor.
What about the paint in the 5
gallon? Oh yeah. There was I left a 5-gallon paint bucket in the back of my Ford Excursion or Ford
now,
Explorer.
5 gallons, guys, if you're looking, it's like this big.
5 gallons is like one of the big jugs of water. Right?
Yeah, it's like 3. Well, I don't know. It's like 2 feet tall by 2 feet
Actually,
around.
I don't know. Is a painter's bucket 5 gallon? It might have been 3. It was a lot. Whatever a painter's bucket is.
And it got knocked over.
Where you take the paint knife and you cut the edge of the lid off.
Didn't you go to the gas station to get gasoline to clean the back?
Yeah, because I didn't know how paint worked. I'm like, you could use water. It's water-soluble latex paint.
And when you realized what had happened down the street, all the way down the street to
this day,
station.
Portland, Oregon has a nice little
white
Pape Le Pew
paint trail.
Pape Le Pew.
Oh my God.
The white paint. There's a strip of paint that's about 400 yards long down the center of the street. It doesn't mean anything, folks. You can change lanes if you want to. But, oh, God. Yeah.
What was his name? The guy that helped you, that taught you about holiday. Andy with
the beard.
The beard. He was we lived in Portland.
He was a maintenance guy.
Time. He was your flannel. If you consider a stereotypical Portlandian.
Dude, This guy was it.
Long hair,
long red hair,
beard.
ponytail, beard. Occasionally didn't smoke weed.
Flannel shirts, corduroy pants.
Always stoned out of his mind.
Birkenstocks.
Yeah, but he said, yeah, if you guys,
socks.
he's basically saying, if you guys score me an eighth of weed each, I'll teach you how to paint on a Saturday. And he taught us how to paint, and we didn't know how to do it. And thank God Andy did it, because we were able to make another 10 grand a month.
Yeah, you made a lot.
Another 10 grand a year.
You made a lot more money.
I think we went from 2 grand a month to 3 grand a month.
Yeah.
Because of painting. And at least we didn't have to work as hard.
Yeah.
And I remember 1 month we set a goal. We were going to take you girls to dinner. And we had to make $4,000 in a month. And we'd never made like $2,500 in a month. And we're like, all right, let's set a crazy goal. We set the goal of making $4,000 a month. And we did it one time when we took you to dinner in West Lynn at that Italian food place. Yeah.
I don't remember the name of that place, but it was really good. So
yeah, the dinner was like $100, which I was like, oh my God. $100 for dinner, so much money.
The joy of laughing and thinking about these moments.
I don't ever want to live like that again.
Are reminisce. It's just fun. It's fun to think of where you come from. It's fun to think of the at the time, at the moment, you're just doing the best you can. You're just, 1 foot in front of the other, and you're questioning, how did I get here?
I know.
And then 30 years later, you're laughing about, cat poop in the door tracks.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah. The people that had their cats. My question is, where was the rest of the cat poop? But we had to clean the sliding glass door. I guess they never used the sliding glass door. The sliding glass door was like packed, caked on all the way up to the top.
In the track.
Like you're measuring brown sugar for cookies or something in the track of cat poop. Literally hardened. We were like chiseling it out with screwdrivers, having to get cat poop out of the sliding glass door track. I'm like, what the F are these people thinking? This place is disgusting, man.
I think another
and then the curry.
Yeah. Yeah,
curry was the worst.
Curry leaves a on par with nicotine.
Curry was like smoking without the smoking. The folks that cooked with curry a whole bunch, that was just brutal. Those were the worst to clean because, in America, not that many people cook with curry. So the people moving in are not going to be like, oh, joy.
Yeah. Home.
This place smells like home already. No, not at all. That was brutal. Curry would usually take us an extra 2 hours.
I think it's pretty cool to talk about this because it paints a picture of why you are so passionate about
selling software.
About doing anything other than being in maintenance.
We did. Mitch and I built cedar fences.
Yeah.
I dug a mean cedar fence post hole. We've dug cedar fences. We built retaining walls and construction sites. We did job site cleanup, light construction, framing, drywall, painting, janitorial cleanup, apartment turns, electrical, chimney cleaning. I mean, we just did whatever it was brutal. And then, moving from that to selling merchant accounts, except I didn't make any money. I closed 75 new deals. And I'm still 20 grand in the hole on my credit card just to pay rent and pay for gas. And then I realized, wait, how come Paul's living in a 5,000 square foot house, driving a motorhome around and never shows up to work? Oh.
Paul was his, it was kind of like a boss.
Yeah. He was my upline, I guess you could say, or the guy that brought me in. Anyway, we're closing these deals. The commission on them is like $2 grand, and I'm getting like $150. I didn't realize the commission was $2 grand. He told me the commission was $300. And so I'm doing the math, and I did 70 deals I made $8 grand that year. So let's just figure out. I grossed $8 grand. I think I'm still writing off.
That's pretty gross.
Actually, no, I made $8,500 and I think I closed 62 deals, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So my average, I was making $137 commission per deal. And Paul was making like $2 grand per deal. So I made $8 grand. Paul made $125 grand. And I did all the work and he did none of it. And I'm looking at that going, all right, this is, and that was in 6 months. So I made him 120 grand in actually it was like 4 months because we eventually ran out
You
of
were
money.
just so grateful that you didn't have to clean
But
cat
I was grateful I didn't have
anymore.
to scrape cat feces out of sliding glass door tracks that I was willing to do it. So I did that, and then I did another one, and then I got into software hardware sales for IPT Computerland on the 1st of January in 2000. So cleaned apartments in 97, painted apartments in 98, merchant accounts in 99. And then I got my first job at IPT Computerland working for Paul Thompson, which lasted about 11 weeks before I got fired from that job. And then we moved down to Dallas, and I went to work for onejobs.com and got fired from that job in like 3 months. Then I went to work for Gary Weiss, and
well, I think that it's important.
That lasted about a year.
I think it's important for our listeners and our viewers.
I'm really good at getting fired, by the way. I'm a pro at getting fired.
I think it's important for them to perhaps in getting this inner glimpse of how you operate and how you
buddy, by the way, a shout out to Doug Renner. Doug's like, don't tell him you got fired. That's not good. I'm like, dude, it happens so often I don't even remember it. I have to work at it.
I think it's important that people see and they get to see into a picture of taking a square peg and attempting to fit it into a round hole, and recognizing over time that you were trying to treat your jobs like you have treated a business. You've always had a mindset for entrepreneurship and business.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say, as your spouse being with you this entire time, that after you've told me the scenarios and the use cases of what happened leading up to being let go or being fired, however you want to put it, you want to say
fired.
brutal, fine.
Well, I mean, sometimes I'm laid off with severance.
But being leading up to it, you had always been treating it like a business, like you were staying up all hours. You were treating clients, you were going aggressive with the client in order to push the client to a point to where maybe they were a little uncomfortable, but it was always with the best intention in order to not take them for more, but in order to be like, no, you really need this portion. This is what I can see. And so being able to astutely see what the client needs from a business standpoint and being able to trying to treat your job like a business got you fired every time, because upper management doesn't want to see young, ambitious entrepreneurs rising up in the rank, because that puts their job at risk.
I think that I don't know. To be honest, I've been fired, laid off, or gone out of business now 35 times or so. The going out of business, I can tell you what causes that. The getting laid off, a lot of times that's just they have layoffs and your number's up if you're too young or too rambunctious inside the organization. Like getting laid off from Cisco, I honestly believe that Kathy Holmes did not know when she gave me the promotion that she was going to let me go like a month later. But I volunteered like a fool looking at it now. I volunteered to take the biggest number territory of all the folks, of about 100 people in my company. I was the youngest one.
You've got big faith.
I had faith that I could take the number down.
Attribute of being a business owner.
And then Vic Guerreri didn't like me, and so he put me on the chopping block when they went through the 2008.
Well, I think when you take someone who's 20 years old and who has begun the process.
I was
30 years old. So well, I'm talking in the early, when you're in your later 20s and you're beginning the process of renewing your mind, you're totally dedicated to success and success doctrine. You're getting that faith muscle, believing that you can do huge things. You're a business owner. That is an extremely threatening position for other people who have, gone to college. They've done the status quo.
There are so many people that have gone to college that are like they study business, but they're not business people. They don't think 24/7. They don't think always on. They don't think growth. They don't think scale. They just think, I'm just going to protect my little. Yeah. And I'm like, man, you study business. Why aren't you in business? Why don't you at least think like a business person? But they don't.
Don't let him fool you. He's the guy that's walking in with his briefcase 20 6 years ago. And, How to Win Friends and Influence People is falling out, and 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and every Malcolm Gladwell. And you got the other guys who have had the job longer, who are his boss, who's just got done reading, the swimsuit centerfold illustrated version on the back of the toilet. So you may or may not have been a little threatening. And then if you also consider your self-image was growing, it wasn't as high as it is now. And so you were kind of taking jobs that were, they were kind of the lower fruit. Like it was
they were not, like, I never took leadership positions because I wasn't trying to be over anybody. I was just trying to make the biggest contribution. I figure eventually people are going to figure out that I can lead, and
they're just going to fire you because
they'll just fire me because and then, but in that period of time,
they hate being there anyway. So
I'll go into a company, and I've done this a bunch of times, just because, and I don't say this in any way to boast. The way that I see it, I remember, and Harmer will attest to this. I came into Perfigo, and I didn't know what a server was. I thought a server farm was where waitresses got trained. I honestly didn't know. They said, "There's our server farm." I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I was telling a friend on the phone the other day.
My dad tried to help you build your own PC so that you could kind of have some idea.
I did. He did. He absolutely did.
Some idea of what was in a computer.
It was great. We did the pinouts, the little, on the motherboard, setting all the pinouts and the memory modules and getting a chip, and we put it together, and it actually, it helped. It helped a lot, so I could understand, okay, this is what hardware is. Here's the difference between a hard drive and a memory module, and here's if you need more RAM, you pull out the RAM module, 64-bit, 64 megs, and put in a 128 meg chip. I don't even know. They're gigs now,
Andrew.
But they were much smaller back then. But yeah, figuring out how to attach all the cables and then give it power and boot the thing up, plug the screen in, and it worked. And that was interesting. But from an engineering perspective, I couldn't care less. I was more interested in what's the application of the computers. How do we get people back on the golf course? Because they don't have to spend as much time working because the computers are doing the work for them. And so I was always interested in the people side of it. I'm really, more than anything, I'm more of an HR person.
Yeah.
And when I think of HR, I'm not thinking of it as, protecting the company from getting sued for wrongful termination. I'm thinking of HR as like talent acquisition, talent development, networking with people, getting culture, making cultural change management toward growth. But I do that as a hobby, as a function of selling more software than anybody else, typically in whatever business I'm in. But if I go back, the desire to do something really amazing was always there. And I went to Perfigo. I got my first big boy inside sales job at a Silicon Valley startup in 2003. I'm so grateful to this day. Rohit Kshetrapal will live on the Hall of Fame of the Heilman household forever, because he gave me a shot. I cold called this guy, and he's like, "I'm busy." I'm like, "Okay, I'll call you next week." He says, "Okay," and then I call him next week, which apparently people don't do. I did, and I said, "Can you interview me now?" He says, "No, call me tomorrow." So I called him the next day, and I called him the next day, and then he's like, and then I called him on a Thursday, and I go, "Look, I'm going to be in the city at 2:00. He, to this day, by the way, Rohit, if you ever watch this, he to this day didn't think I had an interview that morning. He thought I was totally full of crap. And I did. I had an interview in the city at 11 because I think I had 185 interviews in about 2 months. I had a stack. That was the big thing that Jason Johnson wanted to see. He goes, how many companies have you interviewed? And I said, I don't think it's 200, but it's getting close. He goes, 200? I said, yeah, you want to see my database? He goes, sure. And I pull out this file folder of one-page Craigslist.
You've been going on Craigslist and you've
postings.
Been printing.
Yeah, I've been printing. I just, print the Craigslist posting.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the 180 job postings. It was that I used a different color pen for each of the times that I'd interviewed for that job. And there was 6 and 7 and 8 colors of pen on each of the 180 jobs that I had interviewed for. Inside sales, outside sales, HR position, project manager, pre-sales engineering, which I know absolutely nothing about, sales manager, inside rep, door knocker, business development, VP of sales, like
underground real estate,
anything, right? So I had 180 pages of job postings, each with 5 and 6 colors of ink, different colors of ink, so I could keep track of all these different ones. And I got one job offer in 4 months, and it was for Rohit. And in the beginning, I was like scared. I didn't really know what I was doing. And then Rohit takes me to the woodshed, like at the end of the second day. And he's like, today's going to be your last day. I'll cut you a check right now. I need the guy that harassed me for 2 weeks to get the interview in the first place on that phone. And I'm like, okay, I'll find a way. And he goes, you better, because this will be your last day if you don't.
That was 2 weeks. I think
it was a couple. It was maybe a week and a half.
A week and a half.
But Rohit was, I mean, his dad, growing up in India, his dad sent him to an aluminum smelter for the summer to work for his uncle when he got a B in school. He's like, I don't want to do the accent to be disrespectful, although I can do it phenomenal.
He could know.
He's like, look, if you don't get straight A's in computer science,
this is where you're going to end up. So
for the rest of your effing life in college, this is where you're going to be, right? And he got straight A's all the way through a master's in computer science at University of Colorado.
So what did you do to click over to become the animal that he was looking for?
I thought about you guys. I thought about the fact that it took me 4 months to find one job, and this is the best job that I was ever going to get at my current skill level. And if I didn't light those phones up, and I panicked, and then I clicked over into survival mode, and then I drove 60% of the revenue of that company through my phone in the next 10 months, including 80 different net new logos that I'd landed, $4.5 million in revenue of the $7.5 million that we did as a company. And the other 7 sales reps did the other $3 million.
So here's a question. How do you think? I once heard, or at least I've heard the interview multiple times, Dick Van Dyke saying about Mary Poppins, he'd never done as good of a movie as that, and he never did as good of a movie as that ever again. Which, in my opinion, is a self-fulfilling prophecy, that he did never ever do another movie as good as Mary Poppins, and that was kind of his best, most memorable. He's done good things. How do you keep from only ever living in the Perfigo, or how do you keep from only ever living as the touchdown guy that did the one touchdown that saved the team, and that's it?
I think, and I'll tell you, I think Mary Poppins came out in '65, same year as Sound of Music. By the late 60s, his health was not yet failing. Walt Disney's at the peak of his fame. He's at the peak of his income. He's got this amazing theme park that's just crushing it. He's able to attract an incredible amount of attention and talent with the Sherman Brothers doing music, and the guys, the cinematographers and key grips doing lighting.
They were building equipment because they were inventing innovation with new cameras.
And then you got the whole deal
technology.
that Walt was able to negotiate with Mrs. Travers, on the book, which was not an easy situation for him to be able to get that story. So you have an incredible story. You've got one of the icons of 20th century entrepreneurship and business, one of the icons of entertainment, the icon of animation, the icon of movie making for the first half of the century, all in one human being.
And you got Dick Van Dyke coming off of his show.
Dick Van Dyke coming off of the Mary Tyler Moore show, and then the Dick Van Dyke show after, because he was on Mary Tyler Moore first, I think.
I think he was just on Dick Van Dyke.
Okay, we'll check it in the comments.
With Mary Tyler Moore.
I think Mary Tyler Moore I don't remember. Mary Tyler Moore was the one.
Came after.
I thought she made him.
No. Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore.
Was it the Dick Van Dyke show?
The Dick Van Dyke show, yeah.
What's the one that we watched, the black and whites?
That's Dick Van Dyke. That's the Dick Van Dyke show.
With Carl Reiner?
Yes, that's the Dick Van Dyke show.
All right. I stand corrected on my television history of the 1950s.
He's coming, because that was the 50s. And
so he's got the number one show.
Yes.
He's coming off the number one show, produced by Carl Reiner, who would go on to produce great.
Ocean's 11.
Yeah, Ocean 11. What's his name? Thurston Howell.
Yeah.
Gutenberg. No.
No.
What was his name in the show? What did Carl?
Carl
Reiner
in the show?
It's like
anyways.
Steufen Hoffenberg or something. He has his name.
Yes.
Oh, it'll come to me. It was so great when Andy Garcia's like, I don't believe this guy. He's full of crap. And 2 days later, he was at the dog races in Miami, and now he's playing a German billionaire. But you have Carl Reiner,
Yeah.
who's producing it and acting in it. You got Dick Van Dyke coming off the #1 show. You got not Mary Tyler Moore. You got Julie Andrews coming off of doing Camelot for 8 years.
Yeah.
Camelot and My Fair Lady on Broadway. She was really pissed, by the way, when they gave My Fair Lady to Audrey Hepburn in the movie, but I think Audrey Hepburn killed it.
Yeah.
But I can imagine Julie Andrews being kind of pissed because she did it on Broadway for 8 years. She knew all the soundtracks cold. But she'd done Camelot. She'd done My Fair Lady. She'd done all these great stuff on Broadway. And she'd just gotten done doing Sound of Music, which was a 3-year production, also released in 1965. So she's finally free from contract. You got the book from Travers. And then you've got the Sherman Brothers doing what some might say is one of the single greatest soundtracks in the history of the movie-making business. And it all comes together at once. Very, very unlikely to be able to duplicate that moment in time when there's still this sense of theater and post-vaudeville Americana, but with a British stint to it. And then you got Glennis Johns was in it, and then the dad, who was also very famous at that point.
And the choreographers.
And the choreography. And then you have animation and animatronics plus animation.
Plus
live action combined on the editing room.
How do you move on from that?
So here's what you do. Here, in my opinion.
How do you have a great life post the best?
Number one, I think, and I had to do the same thing at Perfect. I get choked up every time I think about it. Let's just talk numbers for Perfect, okay? We took 1,200,000 burned down from 1,800,000 in a tiny office in San Francisco that we negotiated with the furniture's post-bust. That was founded by 3 guys who had just left a startup that they filed S1s the week before September 11th on the previous startup that failed. They recalibrate. None of them want to go get jobs. They go raise $1.8 million from Greylock. They struggle. That was in May of 2002. Rajesh started coding the Perfigo. It wasn't Clean Machines yet. I think it was just the Perfigo gateway. It was a wireless LAN gateway. And we get one use case from the CIO of T-Mobile, who Rohit and Arvind were both buddies with. And he says, effectively, September 11th wiped out our network in New York City for days. That can't happen again. I need a server or a system that'll serve a certain type of subnet. It's called a /30 subnet in layer 3 networking, which for you guys, the tech folks out there, I did learn about a /30. But effectively, it was each session, each IP session would be on its own, in its own container. And he says, I need a server that will serve up 1 million /30 subnets in less than 60 seconds, because cell phones, as those of you know, I don't know if it's IP traffic, but it might be actually, I don't think it's IP traffic. But even on the digital signal, the cell phones needed in the network config, they needed to be able to be on their own /30 subnet. And he couldn't do it. So we find this guy, Tim, who looks like the guy from Highlander. I mean, he's 6 foot, looks like 6'8", looks like he was born in Ireland, balding, but bright red hair down to his shoulders coming off the back. This big, goofy guy, and he coded a server based on a hardened Linux operating system. He coded this thing in 3 weeks. And they got a monster contract with T-Mobile, and they're like, "Wow, what else could we do with this? What are the other use cases? Where else could you use /30 subnets?" And /30s were very secure, and the hardened Linux operating system was very, very secure also. So we started looking at network security as an option. This is right before I get there. So we get there. That was in May of 2002. We go all of 2002. We get about 10, 15 customers. Then all of 2003, another 10 or 15 customers. We're still burning $200,000 a quarter, and we have barely enough revenue to keep the lights on. We're almost out of money at this point. Then I show up in October, and then Rohit gets this brilliant epiphany sometime between October and December of being able to add a port scan with the access. So one is going to make sure the device is secure. The other is going to make sure the user is secure on the network. and combined those two, and we were the only ones doing it for that first 7 or 8 months, and we found a huge problem inside of college campuses that we could actually force students who own their machine to clean up their machine before they went on a college campus network, which has no pipe to the internet at all, times 20,000 machines that are infected with every God's, Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Basically, what he's describing is when you go into Starbucks and it pops up and it says, blah, da, 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 you need to do this.
Yeah.
Enter your email.
It's a prompt. It's a prompt when you're joining a wireless network. That prompt, we extended that to college campuses and made sure all the network traffic on there was cleaned up before the students would get on. And then if back in the day when you were updating antivirus manually, they could kill every session and update the new antivirus software before the students could get back on the network, and your network problem would go away in seconds. And we're solving problems that presidents of universities would get screaming phone calls from parents as to why their kids couldn't send an email on a college campus, that they were spending $300 a month for a tech fee.
Yeah.
And they couldn't send an email with their final paper on it because they couldn't get an IP address. That was a massive problem. And everybody had the same problem at the same time, and we were the only ones for the first year selling that product.
So how do you get through that? How do you reason with maybe never being able to duplicate that again?
I think a couple of things. Number one, you got to be grateful for the fact that you were in I still look at Perfigo as if I were on 8 seasons of Friends as a recurring a starring cast member. That was how cool it was for me to be able to be at Perfigo, to take $1.5 million in venture capital and do an $80 million exit in a year and a half.
Yeah.
2 years. I mean, I was there 10 months.
Yeah.
To be responsible for 60% of the revenue of a company that grew and was profitable and exited before anybody else in the space exited, and then to take that and grow it to a multi-billion-dollar business. And when it was all said and done, they shut it down in May of 2019, and they sold over $2 billion of our piece of shit software that was held together with cardboard and dental floss. I mean, Rajesh, God bless him, he didn't have the resources to build a $50 million a year run rate business, but that's what it became because the concept was that good and that perfectly timed.
I guess that the answer to the question is you don't let it become your
identity.
Well,
there's a couple pieces of it.
Like it can't.
No, it's the other way around.
Identity.
It's the other way around. You use it to create the identity of saying, I was a cast member on Friends, or I was a cast member on Seinfeld or on Frasier. And because of that, my standards are very high. But then you gotta apply some flexibility with Chris Voss saying, Chris Voss says it best, never negotiate so hard for what you are committed to that you're not willing to negotiate for something better. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at something like Frasier, keep in mind, right? Kelsey Grammer was on the cast of Cheers toward the end. And then you sit there and you watch Cheers end.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do something better than Cheers? And yet Frasier did.
Mm-hmm.
Frasier was way more successful than Cheers was. And with Seinfeld, you look at how much more successful was Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee than Seinfeld from, now granted, Seinfeld made $800 million from NBC during that period of time, but you do not have Seinfeld in perpetuity the same way that you got Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I guess what I'm saying,
you don't let it become your identity, meaning it was the comedian within that role that made the role what the role was. And so he's able to take that into his movies, and he's able to take that with him everywhere that he goes.
So I think there's a couple things.
Yeah.
Number one, you got to recognize that you're incredibly fortunate. I remember, I think Jennifer Aniston and Courtney Cox were being interviewed one time, and they said that the producer for Friends, when they got the contract signed, put everybody on a private jet and went to Vegas as a team. And they said, this is the last time that you're going to be able to walk through Vegas as a civilian. Mm. And I want you to have fun. And they're like, this show is going to be so big, so fast that you are not going to be able to go anywhere unrecognized for the rest of your lives. So I want you to enjoy it. And they spent 3 days in Vegas playing, gambling, going to the spa, just being normal people. And then the show hit like the next week. So I think that number one, you want to how do you do it again, or how do you deal with that level of fame? And it was kind of fame for us too, right? I mean, I went from $2,000 a month my whole life to like $250,000 in my checking account and a multi six-figure job at a brand name company that was responsible for building our town at Cisco, which when I went to Cisco, they were a year removed from being the most valuable company in the history of the world. They had an $800 billion market cap and their stock was at $80 a share. And we got acquired. It was $17 a share, which is great for us because when it went up to 32, we were able to, I dumped all my shares between $25 and $30 a share. And made tons of money, and it would not return to $30 a share for like another 15 years. Now it's much bigger than that, and Cisco's a great place to be because infrastructure is taken off. But I think number one, you got to recognize how fortunate you are just to be in America, to be able to speak English and live in America. Like, how much luckier could you possibly be in this world that we live in than to be born in America and to speak English fluently? Like right then, regardless of your color, regardless of your gender, regardless of your age, if you speak English and you live in America, you have been given an unbelievable gift of prosperity and abundance. And I still believe that. Number two, if you're able to make a transition from a low-tech job to a high-tech job, that's crazy. Like, I know a lot of people, I'm not going to mention any names, but I know a lot of people who were in the same piece of junk apartments with their cars bleeding oil out in the same parking lot that our car was bleeding oil out into, and radiator fluid and AC fluid and everything else. Condensation for AC is what I meant to say. That kind of soupy mixture of condensation off the air conditioner and leaking oil and antifreeze. It's a special smell. But to be able to do that and go from that to $1 million income earner in technology is insane. And I think gratefulness is a big, big part of it. The second thing is you got to realize that, can lightning strike twice? Yes, it can. Yes, it can. But you can set your standard on what you do and how high you perform at a certain level. But if you expect lightning to strike a second time and you're waiting for it or pining for it rather than going into it saying, hey, great people, great projects, that's all that matters to me, I'm going to do my very best. And I think that we see the career of like Julie Louis-Dreyfus, right? She did The New Adventures of Old Christine after Seinfeld, which was not nearly as successful. But it looked like she was having fun, and it got renewed for several seasons. And I thought it was super funny. I thought it was a really well done show. Seinfeld didn't do any OT. He's like, screw that, I'm done. Larry David has gone on to do some amazing things. He just got a new show with Obama that's released. Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Unhappiness with Barack Obama and Larry David, which is kind of, I'm looking at that going, that's kind of a Martha Stewart, Snoop Dogg pairing, right? You kind of oddball humor that you would think to pair those two, kind of diametrically opposed. And Kelsey Grammer was able to do a second act. I think that I was able to do a second act in a small way at Cisco with the Nat-Alaskan pipeline. I was able to take what I'd learned at Perfigo and parlay that into a great success with our channel program. And then I was able to do another great second act. CA was no good. Intel, I closed some major deals at VMware and GE that were really good. But that didn't have the right culture, and we got gobbled up by another group inside. So there's political stuff, and I was on the outside looking in because they didn't like me because I wasn't OG Mashery, even though I was part of the team and the number one sales rep and did the same amount of revenue as the other 20 sales reps that I was, paired with as a stepchild. Did that for a couple of years. IBM, no. IBM didn't really have it. IBM had its seasons, and certainly Watson Analytics had its run. But Oracle, I was able to have a good second act at Oracle.
Well, I like it's
really good.
There's a parable in scripture where it talks about the rich man, and he's got his barns and they're overflowing, and he's got full barns, and he says, because he wants more, he wants to increase, he wants to do it again. And he's like, I know what I'll do. Like, he's like, I'm going to just tear down and do it again. And he gets reprimanded. Like, that's being wicked, because you can never do the same thing again. but you can
do
go
it
to the
differently.
source where that came from, and you can seek the source where that came from, that original inspiration, insight, that
and
tapping in.
I
And
don't
I've
mean to
seen
take
you
any
continue.
credit.
Oh no, and I'm not trying to say
to
that
take
you
credit
are.
for
I'm
what
just
God
saying,
did for us.
I
I'm
was
just saying,
gonna say
how do you
that.
do it again? You stay grateful.
And that's what I was going to say is every time that you've gone on to do something equally as great, it was from a result of going back to the drawing board to where you were.
It's that world-class standard, that drumbeat.
Listening to the quiet, and you were like, I think you were going back to your intuition and to your hunches, because it really was the hunches that got you to where you did Perfect-O. And I'm sure it was the hunch for Dick Van Dyke putting, if Walt Disney's doing a project and P.L. Travers and you got Julie Andrews, he could have said no. He didn't have to say he was going to do the
Julie
Mary
Andrews
Poppins.
did say no to some stuff. There were some other things she said no to do that movie.
And so it's like, how do you, so you're going to look at what they call the writing on the wall. So our encouragement for anyone who's watching today's episode is there is a writing on the wall. We started out this episode with the writing on the wall of it was a good idea to get into business for yourself. It was a good idea to partner with somebody who was doing janitorial cleaning. And there was a hunch that you were going to become successful at it, or at least that you're going to be able to feed your family. And you did. And you actually became so successful doing those apartment turns that you were finding that you had more business coming in than the two of you could handle, and you ended up going different ways.
Correct.
And then there was a hunches for Perfect-O, and there was a this seems like a moment where the right things are hitting.
Sovos
clicking.
was obvious.
So Sovos. So my encouragement to anybody watching is, if you're stuck, or if you feel like you had your Heisman moment when you were in high school and you'll never have that moment again, go back to the initial hunch which led you to make that catch, or the initial hunch which led you to get on that team in the first place. What was it that was like, I'm going to try out for the team? What was it, that little fire that lit in you that said that you needed to go out for that team in that moment, and do what you can, because that's what we're all about. Like, it's all, like, we call it the Jeff Heilman Project because it's a project. Life's a project. It's not finished.
I mean, Perfect-O was great.
Yeah.
Cisco, I almost got fired at Cisco because they're like, what do we do with this guy? He's great at selling this one product, better than anybody else in the world at selling this product. But inside sales reps were supposed to live in North Carolina. If your title was, so they had to change my title. I couldn't be a partnered inside sales rep, or I would have had to move to, and then I'm like, oh, well, I get acquired, and now my stock's not worth anything because I have to leave Cisco because it's that, or move to North Carolina. So to John Kelly's credit, he's like, no, we'll just give him a promotion to biz dev manager, which is like a $6,000 a year raise. And then, but then what do you do with the biz dev manager? You're not an inside sales rep anymore. So they created projects for me to run, and I was horrible at them. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to fund these projects.
We owe John a bottle of champagne.
Something. I don't know. But John flies out in April of 2006. We were acquired in November of 2004. So I finished the first year through June as an inside sales rep, crushed my number, 260% of my number, something like that. And then he makes me a biz dev manager. And then he gives me this project in late 2025, early 2026. And it was an abysmal failure. Like, we just wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm like, you could have given that money to me and I'd have gone on the road selling this stuff myself. And he flies out to California to fire me because he was going to do it in person because I was worthless at that point in that role. And then and then while he's on the flight, he goes,
he has a hunch.
I've got an idea. What if we put Jeff on a plane and we fly him down? He's a pretty good evangelist, right? Let's fly him down to Southern California. And the McGavro brothers, anybody listening to this, Mike and Phil McGavro, DSW, I think, or maybe that's the shoe company, but there was DST or DS something, was the name of these two brothers that had a Cisco reseller business down there. And I flew down there, and I'm down there for 6 hours, and I got 10 customer appointments scheduled through the Rolodex on those guys' phones. And John's like, how did you get 10 meetings booked? I'm like, I just picked up the phone and started calling their customers and saying, you want to hear about this product? And everybody said yes. I think I had like 11 conversations and 10 said, yes, we'll take a meeting. So, and it was because we had rapport, which I didn't have from cold calling. So if you take a guy who's closing 40% of the stuff on the phone cold, and then you actually do warm leads that people have relationships with, because Bob picks up the phone and says, hi, this is Bob. And then my guy sitting next to me says, hey, Bob, it's John. Saw you at PTA meeting last week and looking forward to Little League with little Johnny on Tuesday. Hey, great chatting with you. Yeah, what can I do for you? Hey, I got this guy here who's an expert, flew in from Cisco this morning. You got 2 minutes? Bob's going to be like, of course. Trusted advisor is coming in with this stuff. So we did that. Well, I went on to do that in about 35 cities that year and put $200 million in pipeline for our product.
I think we need to put $200 million in pipeline in our...
I could use $200 million in my pipeline. I put $200 million in pipeline, and I think we did like $40 million on a $12 million number.
That's awesome.
With a handful of sales reps. Everybody made 7 figures that year. I mean, except me. I made, 65 grand plus all the expenses you can write off. So I feel like I just got and that was the thing that pissed me off with John, is I made everybody on that team rich again the second year out of 3 that I was there with the demand gen that I created, and he wouldn't give me a promotion. He's like, no, I'm going to keep you in this. So what I did to John, and this is, I'm not sorry about, I went and prospected inside of Cisco, and I found a job, and I knew he wouldn't let me leave unless I could get him emotionally compromised. So what I did was I waited until John went to the Super Bowl, which was on a Sunday night, and his Bears were in the Super Bowl. And then I called him at 6 o'clock in the morning the day after the Super Bowl, knowing that he would be passed out, hungover, asleep, or some combination of all 3. And I called him. I said, I fixed our problem, John. And he goes, problem. Okay, good. I said, so I'm good to go? He says, yep, do whatever you got to do. And I was like, great. So I accepted the job at 6 o'clock, 6:01 in the morning, the day after the Super Bowl. And then John got his transfer paperwork in the email later that afternoon saying that he approved me taking this other gig, which literally, folks, tripled my income the next paycheck. That's how undervalued I had been fighting this whole time. So I'm like, look, screw these guys. If they're not going to pay me the work that I'm doing, I'm making them. They were making 3 times more than I got in the promotion. So I'm making 1/9 what each of them were getting paid while I was on the road for 40 weeks that year away from my pregnant wife.
I was always pregnant.
Come on, guys. So that's kind of the story of my life, is figuring out how to monetize greatness.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm great. I'm saying the results, if I'm producing the same amount of results as 50 people.
Anytime you listen to the hunch, it's
going to be good, right?
People need to listen to that, obey the hunch.
But the cool thing about it is that became the Mentor Call campaign, which 2018 and 2019, I traveled the world on Cisco's dime as a consultant, making $100 grand a month. And I've got some stuff coming up with a couple of clients right now to extend that. Because I learned, look, if you just take full responsibility for what you're doing, have a world-class standard, commit yourself to excellence, focus on contribution, the biggest contribution you can make, and then growth. Just read a book a month or 2 books a month, or listen to 100 podcasts, or go and look at the top 25 or 30 CEOs and listen to the first 10 or 15 minutes of their most recent keynote speeches, and then use your phone. Your phone can actually record that and come up with a transcript. Take those transcripts, upload those transcripts from the first 10 minutes of each of the 25 top keynote speeches from the best CEOs in the world, upload that into ChatGPT, and then have it give you a yield, and then take that yield and go find the books that it says. Look, we're either after the program or you're not.
Yeah.
If you're not after the program, I can't help you. I cannot help you. I cannot help anybody who is not willing to pick up a book and read and underline and take your 3x5 cards. If it's scripture and you want to learn the word, if it's coding and you want to learn how to code, if it's ChatGPT, like get after the program.
If you have a hunch for a witty invention, that invention needs to be made.
You can make as much money in this country as you want, but it's not going to be handed to you. You have to add more value than anybody else could possibly add. You have to work more hours than anybody's willing to work until you figure out how to do it the easy way, and then work all the hours on top with all the leverage from what you learned how to do to make it easy. And if you do that for 20 or 30 or 40 years, you are gonna get rich.
And Andrew, if you have to make this up and break this up into
Might be two episodes.
Here's part 2. No, but thank you everybody for watching today, for enjoying hopefully the candor between us and our cleaning up of our own lives, in which we can share with you that in the inspiration that you too might be able to clean up whatever challenge that you're going through and continue to press on and press forward. The best
I hope you do.
is yet to come.
Getting rich is the beginning, folks. Like life starts when you're wealthy, because then you can start using the tools and buy the musical instruments and the books and take the travel and buy the golf clubs, all the things that you want to do. All that stuff starts with getting the bucks taken care of. Good luck to you. Thanks for joining.
Have a great week. God bless. And we'll see you next time on the Jeff Heilman Project. Like, subscribe, and don't forget to share.
See ya.
Bye.